Okay, bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Should I start straight away? Yes?
Ramai tak yang join?
Belum lagi ya?
Guess boleh.
Oh, ada
silakan kot.
enter waiting room.
This video isn't available dia kata yang
Okay.
YouTube punya live. On custom live streaming. View. Right now, kalau Zoom is only 7.
Dekat YouTube dah ada 10.
Dah ada 10 Okay.
Rasanya boleh start lah kot nanti.
Okay, alright then.
Alright.
YouTube dah ada dah, Kak Shima?
Okay. So I think I already tekan.
YouTube dah.
Dia kata the video isn't available. What does that mean?
Isn't ke is available? It's not available.
Isn't.
It's not available.
Isn't.
Cuba.
Sekejap Memang again I will.
That link yang you bagi ni
XU FZ. Okay, FZLA FMX. Okay. I think we can start lah. Alright, I can see your face now. Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. It seems that we have a good number of audience, yeah. So without further ado, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you everyone for joining the webinar for research and publication. Alhamdulillah, today we have Dr. Norsaremah as our speaker, and she's going to talk about systematic review. Yeah, I'll be the moderator for today. And yeah, sorry, actually, if you look, I'm looking down, I'm actually looking at my script. Yeah, what am I supposed to say? Yeah, so before we start, please make sure, yeah, all the audience so that the microphone is set to off. Yeah, we have around 1 hour of presentation from Dr. Norsaremah. And if you have any question, you can actually interrupt her. Yeah, she actually allow her to be interrupted, and we don't have to wait until the end of the session. Yeah. There'll be an attendance link given out later, yeah, so don't forget to actually sign up your attendance, yeah. So we are honored to have, as I said, Associate Professor Dr. Norsaremah Binti Salleh, yeah, and the topic for today is how to conduct a systematic review, yeah. So first of all, Dr. Norsaremah is currently the Associate Professor in Computer Science Department in KICT, yeah. And she was the former director of ITD at UM, yeah. So that's actually a big post. Okay, so yeah, we are very honored to have her actually, yeah. And she has about 20 years of experience as an academic, and prior to that, she spent almost 5 years in the industry as analyst programmer, yeah. So she received her PhD in computer science from Auckland, New Zealand. Her research interest includes the areas of empirical software engineering, evidence-based software engineering, and computer science and software engineering education. So she has published over 70 papers in local and reputable international refereed journals and conferences. These include IEEE Transaction on Software Engineering, Empirical Software Engineering, Information and Software Technology, IEEE Software and Journal of Systems and Software. And she's also a senior member of IEEE panel assessor for the FRGS grant and also an assessor for the Australian Research Council. So without further ado, I would like to invite Associate Professor Dr. Norsaremah to start her session. So please welcome Dr. Norsaremah.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Dr. Shima, okay, for the introduction. So I was given 1 hour, inshallah. Maybe, okay, let me share my screen first. Okay, can everyone see the screen?
Yes, yes.
Okay. All right. Okay, what I'm going to share today, inshallah, just a little bit experience, okay, about how one can conduct a systematic review. So this is actually not a new method, okay, it is an established method, already there in the field for many years, especially for healthcare, for medicine, psychology, for software engineering, Quite established. It's been around 10 years, if I can recall. Yeah, it is a good technique. So okay, what I'm going to share, basically, what are the steps involved, yeah, to conduct a systematic review. But before that, one needs to know what is a systematic literature review. So feel free to ask me, okay, if you have any question or concern. All right. I know there are some postgraduate students here, right? So I believe at some stage in your research, yeah, you must do a review. So regardless of the methodology that you use, okay, you need to be aware of that literature review is very important in any stages of the research. All right. So talking about systematic review, okay, it has been there for a while, and what I'm showing now to you is one example, okay, one example of findings from a systematic review, but this is from medicine, yeah, field. So they claim, yeah, they say that systematic review finds COVID-19 vaccine efficacy remains high for at least 6 months. So now the question is, how can they be so confident, right, to claim such a findings? Okay, so this is what being advocated in systematic review, yeah, because for one to claim a statement or findings, yeah, they must have a thorough process. They must go through a very thorough systematic process, yeah, in assessing all the evidence available to come up with a solid evidence like this one. All right. So this is one example of findings from systematic review. So for academics like us, yeah, for postgraduate students, PhDs or master, normally we can publish, yeah, systematic review in either journal or conference papers, because some of the journals, they really welcoming a kind of systematic review study, especially as far as I know, information and software technology is one of the journals that have a specific section on systematic review. So it's a high-ranking journal in software engineering and computer science. So you are welcome to publish, yeah, in that journal. Okay. So what exactly is a systematic review? So talking about a systematic review, it is a kind of secondary study. Okay, this kind of secondary study that uses a well-defined methodology to identify, analyze, and interpret all available evidence related to a specific research question in a way that is unbiased and to a degree reputable. So if you look at this definition by Kitchenham and Charter, okay, it is a review is systematic review is a comprehensive kind of study. It is a kind of a secondary study. It is comprehensive in the sense that we need to have a proper way, yeah, a proper way, a mechanism in order for us to identify, to analyze, and to interpret all available evidence. So you see the keyword all available evidence here is actually sounds very exhaustive, taxing, it's very taxing. And then there is a question, yeah, there is a question, specific research question that we address, yeah, in a review. And the review must be unbiased, okay, and to a degree repeatable. So in order for a review to be unbiased, okay, this is important. In order for a review to be unbiased, there must be a proper way on how one is going to select studies to be considered for the review. All right, so there is a proper way or mechanism on how, yeah, we should select studies. And repeatable here, to a degree repeatable, because systematic review has to be transparent in the way we conduct them, all right? So we should report, yeah, all the steps. We should report all the, I would say, the procedures that we use in order to conduct that review so that other people can actually understand and they can replicate the review. So it is possible. It is possible to actually replicate, okay, systematic review, so long as the method is being defined clearly, so other people understand what we are doing for the review, okay? All right. Any question? Please just interrupt me. Okay. All right. So talking about reviews, right? If you look at this diagram, okay, all kinds of all literature reviews are actually traditionally, I would say traditionally, yeah, traditionally is narrative in style, yeah, because there is a tendency for us to, just well, perhaps gather or accumulate some references related to the topic, but sometimes the way we select the studies depends on our interest, isn't it? And that can be biased as well, because some studies may be interesting because the study is, well, is nicely written, but then sometimes it is there are something sometimes not really relevant, yeah. That can be biased there actually if we do not clear about what sort of studies that we should consider. Okay, it can be biased also in the sense that if, let's say, you just select certain studies of your interest and then ignore other studies that is not according to one's opinion or your opinion, or not, or against your proposed ideas, that is bias in that sense. Okay, and systematic review is a kind of literature review. Okay, it is a kind of literature review. But what differentiates systematic review and literature review is that it has a proper way to conduct the review. Yeah, as mentioned in the definition by Kitchener just now. Yeah, it has a proper way in terms of how you select the studies. It has a proper way in terms of how you evaluate the studies, yeah, the quality of the studies, and then how you extract the data, and then in the end of the day, how you're going to make sense all the data, to synthesize the evidence. So it has a proper way in order for you to conduct the review. And then there comes this meta-analysis as a subset of systematic reviews. So it is possible for someone to conduct a meta-analysis, okay, when they do a systematic review. So the prerequisite for meta-analysis is to have selected the studies following the systematic reviews method. Okay, so one should not supposed to conduct meta-analysis if they did not properly select the studies that should be included. Okay, so you may have excuse me, you may have encountered a paper title that specifically describing meta-analysis. Excuse me. Okay, so that is a specific study that focusing on the I would say quantitative studies. Okay, because it is not possible for you to do meta-analysis combining both qualitative and quantitative studies. Okay, now what are the steps to conduct SLR or systematic review or systematic literature review? Okay, there are 3 simple steps. Okay, it looks simple. The first phase is planning, and then conducting, and then reporting. Okay, so the first phase is planning, where in this phase we need to set the context for the review, for the SLR. Setting the context means we need to really define, okay, what is the focus, the focus topic? What would be the question? So we need to have some sort of planning here. Why do we need to do the review? Okay, and then there comes the conducting phase, which is the most taxing. Okay, the most taxing here because there are a number of activities when we want to conduct SLR. Once we have the planning, once we are clear about what we wanted to review, so when you want to conduct the review, you need to properly follow the procedure. For example, you have to first search the studies properly, and then once you search, you have to properly select. So in order for you to search, you have a proper way to do that, and then to select the studies, you have a proper way to select, and then to assess the quality of the studies. So it is taxing in the sense that there are a number of activities that need to be applied quite thoroughly. And finally, reporting stage. This is where you are publishing, or disseminate the findings from the review. So it is important while conducting and planning, you start to document it. Start to document it so that you don't put this towards the end, because some of the students and they like to put reporting last. That is not a good practice. So the documenting the systematic review process should start from the beginning when you start the SRR itself. Because you have to document what are the process that you are doing. Okay, so by right, when you do the planning, you already have some ideas. You already have the research background written and all that. Okay, so I'm going to detail out these 3 phases. All right, so the first phase when we want to do a systematic review is that there are 2 things here. The first one is that we have to formulate review question, okay, or research question, and then we also need to come up with a protocol. Okay, so there are 2 things. But on top of this, as I said earlier, you need to identify why do you need to do this review, because this is to justify the need for review. All right. So it is not simply that, I wanted to do SRR because, so many people do the SRR. I also wanted to do. That's not the case. Okay. Well, for postgraduate students, it is expected maybe because your supervisor asked you to do that. Okay, so you have to conduct a systematic review, but you have to understand what it is. Okay. So in planning the review, okay, as I said just now, you have to identify the review questions. Okay, and then develop a review protocol. But firstly, you have to identify the need for the review. So even when you write a paper, okay, you need to justify the importance of the topic. So the same thing for SRR. Okay, when you wanted to do the review at the planning stage, you need to think, why is it important for you to do the review? Okay, what is the motivation? What is the motivation for you to address those review questions? Why those questions are important, right? And it takes some time for you to think, to come up with the good questions. But don't worry, because when you start SRR, by right, you already have some readings already in the area. You cannot start from zero. You must have read some papers. You must have read some research about your area. Then you may start, thinking about how you're going to shape, the review in the form of, having a proper way to analyze the study's findings. Okay, so identifying the need for review. Of course, first is to understand the state of the art of an area. If you are a student, a postgraduate student especially, it is very important for you to do review because you need to understand the background of the research, the state of the art of a particular research topic. But to the practitioners out there, okay, maybe for people in the industry, why SRR is also important for them, for medicine, for health practitioner. Why SRR is very, very much important, especially in the beginning when I said this SRR method is already established in medicine and healthcare, because they need to use the evidence. They need to know the evidence. Okay, so for industry practitioners, perhaps the evidence obtained from the SRR will help them to perform decision making, and at some point that can also help them to perform some improvement in their activities. Maybe, for example, they wanted to improve their software development methodology, but they are not sure whether should they proceed with this new methodology or not, and how we can help them, in their decision making. So basically, the evidence from review is very important, not only for academia but also for practitioners. All right. So number one important thing in SRR is you must specify the review questions, and this is what makes SRR different than traditional review. When in the traditional review, you don't really bother about coming out with the questions because you do not have to. But in the SRR, okay, you must have what are the things in your mind, that you wanted to find out. Okay, so this is the most important part in any SRR. Okay, it is used to guide the search process. Okay, because when we have the review question, Okay, we need to know how this review question will help us in the process of selecting and searching, searching the studies. So that will guide us in the searching process and also guide us in the extraction process. Okay, remember, because the end of the day, we are going to extract the data findings from existing studies, and then in the end of the day, we are going to do the synthesis of evidence, that is important for us to answer the research question that we put forward in the SLR. Okay, so among typical question that I receive when I talk about this one, normally students will confuse. But this review question is the same as research question that you post in your thesis. It is not the same. In most cases, it is not the same. Unless if your thesis is purely talking about systematic review. That is a different case. Okay, if for example, master thesis, it is acceptable, okay, to conduct a systematic review, SLR. But for PhD students, okay, you must have a specific questions. It can be called review questions or research question, but it is for the purpose of the review. Okay, remember when you do review, you wanted to know what has been done up to today, okay, for that particular area or research topic. Okay, so that will help you to find the gaps. Okay, that will help you to find what are the implications, what have been investigated so far, okay, in that area. So it's important so you can justify the need for the research based on the findings that you obtain from your SLR. Okay, so that's why the review question is important, because it shapes, it guides, the SLR that you wanted to do. That's why if we look at the process of SLR, it's actually a research process by itself. Okay, now, Piecode. So other than coming up with the questions, well, out of your interest perhaps, okay, one can also use Piecode in order to formulate research question. So what Piecode means? Piecode stands for Population, Intervention, Comparison, Outcome, Context. So this is just a framework, a framework that you can use. This is by, I couldn't recall what's the name. Pettigrew and Robert. They suggested this one. Some use only Piecode, P-I-C-O. Some use P-I-C-O-C. It's okay, it doesn't matter. But it helps you to frame your SLR, because you define what would be the population. You define here the target group of interest. For example, if your review is focusing only on certain people, or only maybe on certain software, maybe you just wanted to focus on software developers or software testers. So you can actually define your target population. And then intervention here, this one is referring to the intervention that you wanted to look in the SLR. For example, it can be a technology, can be tools, can be technique, approaches, methods, any intervention of your interest, any intervention related to the topic that you are addressing. Okay, and comparison is to which the intervention is being compared to. If let's say you wanted to compare intervention with maybe you wanted to compare one particular method with another method, so method A and method B. So you can say you wanted to compare, the comparison would be the method B. Okay, so you can form specifically. For example, if let's say you are doing on pair programming. So pair programming is one practice in Agile. Okay, so that can be an intervention. As a comparison to pair programming, perhaps you can compare the practice of pair programming with solo programming, right? So it is not mandatory to define the comparison, but it is just there because at some point maybe there are researchers who really wanted to look specifically comparing between the intervention and the comparison. And then outcome, we are looking at what we wanted to observe in terms of the effect of the intervention. And finally, the context this is referring to the environment setting. Yeah, like for example, are you looking at only academia context or industry context or government officers or non-government organizations, private or public organizations? So you can define the context in that sense. Okay. This is one example of Piecode by Salleh. Okay, the population is computer science, software engineering students in higher education. So this Piecode is about looking at the practice of pair programming. Yeah, because the practice of pair programming is not new. It has been there for a long time. Yeah, as long as Agile exists. And then I was thinking to see how pair programming has been doing so far, yeah, in education, in higher education, because in industry they are doing it, and also mostly in the States, in the university in the United States, and some other countries they have actively used pair programming. And then the interesting outcomes to be observed here is how effective it has been. Okay, so and the context here is to review all empirical studies within the domain of higher education. Okay, so it is not compulsory to define Piecode. It is not compulsory. It is one of the options for you to frame, and that can help you to actually formulate the research question. Okay, example. Okay, example of question here. We can have one question at least for your SLR. Okay. There is no, I would say, magic number. Is it one question is good or 3 questions is good? No, no such things. Okay, so you can have, for example, one primary question, and then you may have a sub question, or maybe some people, have a number of questions. It's okay, but as long as you can justify the importance of this question, so you need to properly, as I said, when you write the paper, you have to justify the motivation, for you to conduct this review. So to address the research question, so you have a clear objective of conducting that review. Any questions so far? Am I moving so fast or so slow? Okay. So one example of questions here, what evidence is there of pair programming studies conducted in higher education settings that investigated effectiveness of pair programming? This is the big question. I wanted to see to what extent that a particular practice is effective or not. Okay, and the sub question would be to know how they measure the effectiveness. Okay, and to know how they measure the quality. Yeah, because most of the studies based on the reading, they use software quality as the measure of pair programming's effectiveness. So in order for you to formulate the question, you must know what is significance. Yeah, what is significance for you to find out? So it has to start from there. What are you curious about? Okay, what are you curious about? So when you're curious about that particular thing, then you try to formulate that question. And don't aim to come out with a solid, perfect question, because that will never happen in one night. Okay, you usually have to, this is an iterative process. You usually have to come out with an initial question. Maybe that's not good, it's okay. In your opinion, you can discuss with your supervisor, and then you should do reading continuously, because the more you read about that particular topic, the more understanding that you can gain in that area. Okay, so you should have a preliminary reading, to have some understanding, some level of understanding in the area that you are pursuing. Okay, so to help you to do the review. I hope that helps. Okay. Now, it is actually not, I would say, not mandatory for the domain like software engineering, computer science. I have seen even they do review without protocol. That is fine. But if you are in medicine or healthcare, this is compulsory. Okay, to do a protocol, to conduct a review protocol, because there are so many practitioners out there, that wanted to come out, that wanted to develop systematic review. So for them, they have to kind of like submit their review protocol to the repository. So they have a specific repository, and then from there they will have to check first whether is there anyone else doing that review or not. Okay, if the review has been taken by someone else, so you cannot submit your protocol. And this is how they do it, because in the field of medicine and healthcare, they do this almost, like every time. So that they have to do that because they have so much randomized control trials. So how do they, come up with a solid evidence? Yeah, because one single experiment, you cannot rely on the evidence from there or findings from there. So they need a review. They need a proper review. They need a systematic review. So protocol is compulsory for them. But for software engineers like us, for I think even in psychology, people in that domain, protocol is like sunat muakkad. Yeah, it's good to have. Actually, it's good. From my experience, it's good to have a protocol because it helps you to define the plan. Yeah, it is a plan. It's a living document. It's a living document that putting out your strategy to conduct the SLR. So, okay, if you are a novice researcher, like PhD student, for example, then in the beginning you might have a big question like, how on earth I know what are the strategies? Well, you have to understand what SLR is. Okay, you have to know what the steps are, and then have some preliminary. I would say research question. Okay, preliminary strategy to search studies. Okay, preliminary criteria. So when I say preliminary, because you are just to start. Okay, at this point of time, you're not sure how are you going to come up with a proper checklist to assess the quality of the studies. How on earth I'm going to know what kind of data I'm going to extract, what kind of synthesis strategy that I'm going to use. Yes, don't worry. As I said, it's a living document. So when you start your SRR, just have this protocol as much as you can, define the thing, because as you move on, as you learn more, as you read more, you can refine the protocol. And at the end of the day, this protocol serves as a kind of like your draft paper, when you wanted to submit your review for publication. I hope that motivate you. So protocol development is often an iterative process. It is iterative. And should be peer reviewed. Okay, this is important, peer reviewed. So we cannot do this thing short sendiri kind of thing. Okay, so you should show to your supervisor or perhaps your research team, if you have, at least your supervisor lah, so that he or she aware of what you are up to in your SLR. Okay, iterative here in the sense that at some point, maybe you have to reverse back and then check that, or maybe you have to tighten the criteria for you to select the studies. And maybe you have to tighten the way you do the searching. Because when we do this thing, it is not like waterfall. You must settle one thing and then move on. No, that it takes ages. You should go on. But at some point, there are times that you have to revise. It's okay, you revise. Okay, but make sure things are updated. Okay, that's only the first phase. I hope that's not sounds tiring. Second phase. Any questions so far for the planning?
Assalamualaikum, Dr. Sarimah. Sorry to disturb you.
It's okay.
Dr. Azura here. Dr. Sarimah, about the protocol, your opinion, let's say if we develop the protocol and then we go for the copyright, is it okay?
You develop the protocol and go for the copyright?
Yes.
That sounds too early. But actually, depending on the area, because when you want to do the copyright, you must have a solid protocol, right? Well, the protocol, is it a matured one or a draft one?
Yeah, after we completed the SLR.
Oh, after you completed the SLR. Oh, after you completed the SLR. I think it's possible. It's possible because it's like you chok moho, you sign, you register that one. Because in our field, we don't have a formal registrar, a formal repository. We don't have that one. So maybe it's possible to submit, because that's one way. Another way is you can publish it. Okay, so either you do a copyright, or I think preferably is if you're academic, you can publish it. But the thing is, when you want to publish protocol, you don't have the result up there. So in terms of the significance impact for journal, normally they don't consider protocol because normally you do not present findings in your protocol. Okay, in the protocol, we don't write the details of the finding. The protocol only define the methodology. Okay, so it can appear as a technical report. I have never experienced to get send it for copyright, but I think it's a good try, Azura. Maybe can
Right.
try that out
Okay, sure.
and
Thank you, Dr.
to
Zainatul.
get some feedback, because if I were the reviewer, I will see first. Yeah, the significance of the protocol. Well, I can try lah. Maybe boleh try. Yeah.
All right. Okay,
Can I
thank you.
interrupt? How about people from medicines? Do they get copyright for their protocol because they have a repository?
No. Yeah, no. They have repository. I didn't remember what they Prospero. They have a registrar. So they have a place for them to check first whether is there anyone else conduct that SLR or not. And then they can submit requests to do SLR to because they have a proper database or repository to register.
But they don't claim for copyright lah.
Tak, no.
Okay, all right.
Any other question? Okay, now I hope I can finish it. I have 20 more minutes, right? Okay.
Roughly 20 minutes.
Okay. Now, this is the most taxing part, which you have to conduct the review. So once you have done the planning, this is you have to think about how you're going to conduct the review. So based on the protocol again, but because the protocol set out the plan, right? So the first thing is that you have to search, relevant studies, and then perform necessary selection, okay, and then perform assessment of the studies quality, and then perform data extraction, and finally perform the synthesis of evidence, to answer the review question that you put forward in your SLR. Okay, is it necessary that you have to do this one after another, and one after another? Well, it looks like that, but actually you can always, it is iterative, you can always go back to the previous activity. But these 5 activities are expected. Okay, I have seen people who do the SRR, but they don't do the quality assessment. They just ignore it. For the reviewer who don't know about what SRR is, they just accept the paper without checking. Okay, so that is not a good practice, unfortunately, but it's happened because it is important, for a researcher to really thorough in the sense of searching the right evidence, the relevant studies, and then to perform the selection and to perform the quality assessment, and then to perform the extraction and synthesis of evidence. Okay, right. The first step, searching the relevant studies is important here, and typically we all know that we use online databases. This is very common. We use online databases. The main activities is we need to first specify the search string and then apply them to databases. Okay, so this is important. So we know what we wanted to search for, what kind of articles. The aim is to search for all available evidence to answer the review question. Yes, so you need to have some sort of a preliminary search string. And basically the search string consists of the terms or keywords that are important or significant that appear normally in the review question. Okay, so it involves comprehensive and exhaustive. When it says exhaustive, it sounds like, well, you have to try as much as possible. Okay, but for the context of our university, we have a very limited access to online databases. Unfortunately, we have only few access. I think we don't have access to major databases like the Web of Science, okay, like ACM. Those are actually critical databases in the area of computer science and software engineering. but we have to live with what we have. Okay, so we just use what we have, like Atropia Explore, Scopus, what else, whatever that we have in the library. And then you need to brainstorm, okay, or consult the experts, and also to a certain extent apply snowballing. Okay, apply snowballing. All right, so to construct a search string, you need to know the terms. Okay, so basically you know what are the keywords, basically in the RQ or in your Piecode, or even sometimes it appears in the article that you are reading. Okay, so identify what are the synonyms for the words, and then when you define the strings, yeah, incorporate the strings using Boolean and or. Yeah. Okay, this is one example. So let's say, for example, they are doing something related to modeling, yeah, software product lines. They have some terms here, modeling language, software requirements, software product line. These are the common terms, the important terms, the significant terms in their SLR. So when they formulate the search string, they need to actually combine the terms. Yeah, for example, software product lines or product family or SPL. So this is concatenated using OR, and then combined with requirements engineering or software requirements. All right, so they can come up with one search string. So a good strategy is actually you come up with a preliminary search string, and then what you should do is actually to test that out. You have to pilot the search string that you have come up with. Okay, because if you don't pilot it, you don't know how many studies you retrieve. Yeah, because it might possible that you retrieve a lot of false positive. Yeah, you thought that it retrieves good studies, but most of them are actually not related or not relevant. This is happen especially for Springer. Yeah, because sometimes when you run a search, you will end up, receiving like thousands of studies. So you have to revisit the search string, or maybe get advice from the librarian. Okay, all right. So where do we search from? So it's typically that we search from online databases. As I said, we just use what we have in our university. I think they subscribe to Explore, Scopus, Springer, no, only I think up to 2016. And this is no, Web of Science, no. And then you can check from the reference list from primary studies. This is what we call as snowballing. So you can do backward snowballing or forward snowballing. So backward snowballing is that you refer to the reference list for each of the studies and check on there and see whether is there any study that you have not encountered before that is not in your repository. So you can select that as well. And I have seen some researchers use hand search, but this is really taxing because you have to know all the compilations of the journal series and conference proceedings. It's very taxing. You can also use search using search engines, but you cannot rely on only Google Scholar alone. Okay, because these are not online databases. Remember, okay, they are designed to be search engines. Yeah, so the engine is different than online databases. You cannot, for example, formulate a complex or advanced search string when you use search engines, unlike online databases where you can have an advanced search command. Okay, that's the first step. You have to search first and pilot your search. Number 2, you have to now select the relevant studies. Okay, now when you want to select, what is important here is that you have to know what you want to select. Of course, isn't it? So you need to define what are the criteria for you to include or exclude studies. Okay, so this is mandatory. In any SRR, yeah, you have to define, okay, what is the inclusion and exclusion criteria? And it has to be based on the research question and Piecode. Of course, you should know what kind of papers that you wanted to include and what kind of paper that you do not want to include. So to call it exclusion. Okay, so the first step is checking based on or doing the filtering or screening by reading the titles, abstracts, and keywords. Hopefully that helps at the first round. Okay, if the paper is written in a very good manner, when you read the abstract, you know what the study is about. So from there on, reading the title, the abstract, and the keywords, you know it's relevant. But some papers, when you read the title and abstract, you are not sure whether that paper is relevant or not. At that point of time, you have to perhaps read the introduction and the conclusion to see whether that particular study is actually relevant or not. Okay, and the selection can result in inclusion, exclusion, and no decision. Okay, this is possible because sometimes you cannot decide whether that particular paper is actually relevant or not to the context. So you might need to consult your supervisor in that sense. Any questions so far? If not, let me proceed. I'm just giving you one example here.
Okay, Dr. Sarimah, there's one question from YouTube. Yeah, hold on.
Yes, please.
Salam, Prof. Is there any simple way to use a software to come up with a research trend in an area of a certain subject? Say, for example,
is there any, sorry, say again, sorry.
He's asking, Brother Razali is asking whether there's a simple way to use a software to come up with a research trend in an area of certain subject. For example, I want to know what researchers write for the past 5 years in Islamic banking in finance. My source is Scopus. For your info, I'm not familiar with any related software, if there is such.
Okay, that it's not software, but actually what you can do is to search from the online databases. Okay, to find, or even you can search from Google Scholar. If you want to know research trend, normally the keyword there is trends, research trends, or research and trends, isn't it?
Yes,
and concatenate with the topic that you are searching. So you can search by using that keyword first in online databases. Well, software there isn't, but if you wanted to know what people have done, for example, if there is any existing review or not, or if there is any existing survey, okay, or any research that talks about research trends in a particular area. So basically, you can search from the online databases. I think for finance, maybe can refer to Emerald or Scopus. Yeah, Emerald and Scopus or ProQuest. Okay, look at these 3 databases first and find using the keyword, for example, like research trends or review. Okay, and then concatenate that, and then end followed with the keyword or the terms that related to your research topic, financial, banking or whatever.
Yeah, Islamic.
Okay, all right.
Okay. There's another question by Brother Abdul Muhammad. He's asking what is snowballing. Okay, good question. Snowballing. Snowballing, there are 2 things. Yeah, one is backward, one is forward. So backward snowballing is you are looking at who have backward snowballing is that you are checking at what are the studies that one particular article is referring to. Okay, in other words, when you read a paper, at the last page, there is a list of references. Okay, at the last page, there is a last section. After acknowledgement, normally there is the references. Okay, not normally, must. So look at that references. This is backward snowballing. So backward snowballing, you can have a number of iterations. So one iteration would do. What I mean by iteration is, let's say you read one paper. Let's say call it paper 1. Okay, so in this paper 1 there is references. So you do snowballing. Okay, if you see each and individual references. Yeah, each and individual studies appear in the references of that particular paper 1. That is one iteration. And then you can perform another iteration. Yeah, if let's say you found maybe 2 articles relevant, and that 2 articles unfortunately have not appeared when you search the studies using on databases. Okay, but you found the papers when you read that paper. Okay, so then you look at that 2 papers that are relevant, and then from there you find that paper and look again at the references and see that is another backward snowballing. Okay, forward snowballing is, let's say you read one paper 1 just now, and you now wanted to know who cited this paper. Who have cited this paper? This is forward snowballing. Okay, the reason why you need to do snowballing is sometimes not all research are retrievable from online databases. Okay, it may be because the limitation in terms of databases that we have access. Okay, the limited access to databases, number 1. Number 2, maybe the string that we use is not good enough, or maybe not comprehensive enough, or maybe not not good enough. Perhaps that you might have missed some studies.
That's possible. Or number 3, because it's simply because the study has not been indexed. Okay, so when the studies is not being indexed, normally, when the online databases retrieve those studies, it's not appear in the database. Okay, but if let's say you know that maybe you wanted to consider, for example, technical report. Yeah, you wanted to consider technical report, but that technical report is not appear in any online databases. But you saw that technical report maybe in the list of references, and you know that it's an important technical report. So what you need to do is you have to select that study to be included in your SRR, and this is what snowballing is. Okay, it's complementing. It's complementing the search that you are doing using online databases. I hope that answer. Okay. Okay. This is an example of inclusion and exclusion criteria. I'm having 7 minutes more. Can, Dr. Shima? Okay.
Actually, you can go on, because it has been given until 11:30 together with question and answer.
Okay, that's good.
All right.
Okay. Talking about the criteria. Now, just now you have select. Okay. Let's say you have retrieved maybe 250. Okay, 250 studies. Maybe you just download all the bitref. Okay, you can check the papers, of course. But in order for you to select the studies, you need to have a criteria. So the criteria must be set forward, must be defined, before you do the selection, because you need to know what should be included, what should not be included, right? So inclusion refers to criteria that you wanted to consider for a study to be considered to be relevant for your SLR. Okay, exclusion criteria are criteria that you wanted to refer to, and this criteria, if it appears in the paper, then you can just ignore that paper. Okay, so this is what it means by exclusion. For example, here I just wanted to consider empirical studies of pair programming. Okay, within the context of higher education students as the population of interest. So because there are humongous of pair programming studies in industry, but that is a different population, so totally out of context. So you have to know what criteria that you are looking for and define it clearly. So you know these are the selection criteria. Yeah. For example, you do not want to consider papers that talks about opinion that has no evidence. Yeah. Presenting unsubstantiated claims, just claims but no evidence, and then papers talking about other practices not written in English. You can set as well. And then involving students outside higher education, maybe in kindergarten or maybe in different contexts. And another one, maybe you can consider short papers like posters, abstracts, because those are published as well. But do you consider those things? But normally when you do review, you have to consider solid evidence. So short papers like less than 4 pages is too short for you. In software engineering, I'm talking from my domain. Typically we don't consider that short paper because it's very brief. It's very brief, because we don't get so I would say solid findings, because normally short papers and presenting research in progress, something like that, and posters just 1 page, isn't it? So you basically you need to have a good amount of content that to consider. Ada soalan ke? Any question?
Not at the moment.
I saw one in the chat box.
Oh, okay, all right. I just saw. Okay, so another question from Brother Tariq. Can in SLR we inclusion and excluding regarding database? Is it good we only include Scopus database for completing our SLR?
Oh, okay. Good question. Whether we can rely on one single database. I have seen there is, but you need to have justification for that. Scopus is claimed to be the largest database. So find the reference that support that statement. Yeah, so you can claim that you are using only Scopus because it is the largest database and it's the most. So you must have a support there. But because SRR is expected, for you to perform this kind of exhaustive searching. So if possible, try to also consider other databases, because maybe not everything indexed in Scopus. You might have missed some evidence. So if let's say the limitation is there is no other online databases, madam, only this one. Okay, halas. Scopus, okay? But complement that with snowballing, okay? So that you can argue with the reviewer or the examiner that you have tried as much as possible to find evidence using the available method, using Scopus database and also snowballing, backward and forward snowballing. I think that shows your effort, your effort in terms of searching the studies, not only relying on one single database, but you also perform more than that, complementing that search by using snowballing. Okay, so try as much as possible to complement the search to ensure that you have not missed important evidence. This is the worry, because sometimes if the expert in the area, they know, when they read the paper, they know whether certain studies have been neglected or not. Okay, some experts, they already know, well, why this study is not including that study. They will ask you. Okay, so that's why we have to be thorough in our selection. Okay, ada soalan lagi?
No, at the moment.
Okay, all right. So
Okay, there's another one. Okay, hold on. From brother Abdul. Okay, what are the best database for computer science articles?
Okay, very good question. For computer science, okay, the common database that I have used and also that I have seen other researchers doing. First one is IEEE Explore. Number 2, ACM. Number 3, Scopus. Number 4, Web of Science, but we don't have that. To certain Springer, Springer as well. These 5. What else? I think these 5 is most prominent ones. Yeah, for computer science, software engineering. But sometimes for information system, you can also refer to EBSCOhost and ProQuest. EBSCOhost and ProQuest. Sometimes also there is one by TELUS. I don't have the list here. I think if you go to our library, there is the list, but those are the lists given. Those are the lists given. Subscribed by our university. Okay, and if you read the list of databases, you can there's a category there. Okay, it's written the ICT or computer science. So if it's related to ICT, that is relevant for computer science mostly, like Scopus. But for now, our university subscribe only to Scopus and IEEE. I think there is a limit lah. Yeah,
selected papers.
It's limit kan?
Yes.
For IEEE. SCM, no, we don't have SCM. Scopus lah.
Thank you so much.
I hope that answered the question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Inshallah.
Step number 3. Okay, we have half an hour. Step number 3 is talking about quality. Okay. After you have searched the study and then select the studies, and the next step is to assess the quality of the studies. Okay. So talking about assessing the studies qualities, this is checking in terms of the how good, in terms of the design of the studies, in minimizing bias and maximizing internal and external validity. It's kind of subjective, when we talk about quality, because when you say one study is good, what is the criteria for you to say that a study is good? Or this one particular paper, this is excellent paper. What is the criteria that you use in order to say that that is an excellent paper? Okay, or that is a paper of good quality or very poor quality. Okay, and the concern of SRR here, because unfortunately there are some papers that are of not good quality, but they are published. Unfortunately, they have been published for the sake of numbers. So when those papers are published, okay, is a job of a researcher or academia, okay, for us to see how reliable the findings of the study. When we wanted to see the reliability of the findings, okay, we have to see the conduct. We have to know how do they conduct the study, how do they design the study, how do they analyze the data, so to the extent, how do they ensure that they have maximize the internal validity. Yeah, as much as possible, they try to control the variables if they do the experiments. As much as possible, they try to consider the confounding factors. So this is the extent to which a study is of good quality or not. And of course, there are a number of measurements when we wanted to evaluate the study quality, and mostly we can define a checklist. Okay, so if you read guidelines out there, there are a lot of guidelines in conducting SRR. Yeah, and in many of the guidelines, they would say that you might have to create only one particular checklist, a quality checklist. Yeah, so this quality checklist is for you to list out what are the criteria that you wanted to see appear in the paper, and if it's not fulfilled, then you can say that, or this paper is missing in the sense, so maybe in terms of the scoring of the quality, maybe you can it deserve to get a lower marks. Yeah. So why SRR is concerned about quality study? Because you do not want, in the end of the day, when you synthesize the evidence, you do not want to consider studies of poor quality, because that will affect the validity of your results somehow. Okay, so that is the motivation, that is the expectation. So we need to know how do we measure the quality. But for the field like, again, healthcare, they have a specific instrument. I think that if I can recall, they call it grade or something. Yeah, they have this instrument that people can use to measure the quality of a study. Okay, but in field like psychology, education, software engineering, typically we can just come up with a simple checklist. It is not necessary that the checklist has to be thorough or so much things you wanted to see. Well, at least there is a means for you to see the level of quality in a study. This is the expectation. Okay, for example, this is one example of quality checklist. Okay, there are 7 items here. Okay, so these are the items that we wanted to see. For example, whether the article is referred or not. If it's a refer article, it has a greater weightage there. So it is normally of good quality as compared to an article that is not referred. So you can perform a scoring, for example, if it's yes or no. If it's yes, maybe you can give 1 point. If it's no, 0 point. If it's partially, 0.5. Okay. Were the aims clearly stated? Were the study participants adequately described or not? Data collection, how about that? Is it well or not being carried out? Is there any confounding factors? Do they control or not? Whether they the approach and the formulation of the analysis is okay or not, whether findings credible or not. There are many more. This is an example. These are some references. Well, maybe I can share the papers. So when you design the checklist, I think one of the things I need to highlight as well is that you need to know the nature of studies in your area, whether most of them are quantitative in nature or qualitative or mixed. Okay, at some point you might need to have a separate checklist. Yeah, one checklist is purely for assessing the quality of studies, quantitative studies, because quantitative studies, for example, like formal experiments. Okay, you can design a checklist that contains questions like, for example, whether they define clearly the variables or not. Okay, whether the statistical techniques used is correct or not, or making sense or not, and then the choice of analysis is correct or not. So if that is the nature of the study is quantitative, then maybe you can have a checklist that specifically assess the quality of quantitative studies. Okay, and another checklist to assess the quality of qualitative studies, because qualitative studies is different. Qualitative studies, they don't have specific variables, like case studies, like what else, grounded theory, those kind of studies. They don't have variables. They are observations kind of study. They are doing observations, for example. All right, they have qualitative findings. Maybe they come up with a theory. All right, Well, things like that you need to see as well in terms of how they design, the qualitative studies. So you can have a separate checklist, or you can combine them and like this one, and then have one generic question that both qualitative and quantitative can basically applicable. Okay, I hope that helps. So in the end of the day, when you do the assessment of studies quality, so you have the scoring, okay, 0, 1, 0, 1. So let's say the study is very good, all yes here. So that particular paper scores 7 out of 7. Okay, but let's say the studies obtain maybe less than 2, maybe 1 out of 7 or 2 out of 7. So you have to check that paper. Highly likely you have to remove that from your SLR. Highly likely, because if you include that studies, it is questionable, when you wanted to synthesize the evidence, when you include such a poor quality of study. That's the point, and this what makes that's what makes SLRI taxing and very comprehensive in that sense. You're really concerned about the study that you wanted to consider. All right, step number 4 is that performing the data extraction. Okay, so in here you are talking about you have the set of the studies that you wanted to consider for your SLR. So let's say you found like there are initially 400, and maybe in the end of the day you come up with, there are only 25. Okay, so these 25 studies are the studies that you have to read, the full text. And then when you perform data extraction, you can actually design what we call it as a data extraction form. So this one, basically you can use a simple like Excel sheet or Google spreadsheet. If you are collaborating with another researcher, it's preferable to use the cloud-based extraction form, so that easy for you, to assign the task. If you maybe have a few people perform the data extraction, maybe you can pass 50% of the data to another person, and you do another 50%. Okay. So there is happens sometimes papers that publish more than one time. The same paper maybe appear in conference, but then the researcher maybe refine the paper and then put some more content and then publish in a journal, for example. So in the case of that, a study that actually a similar topic, but appear in conference and journal, so refer to the most complete one, if you found this kind of situation. This is commonly happen in computer science, in ICT based research, because normally in conference, normally they will kind of like extend the invitation for the authors to actually send to journal, provided you provided 30% changes, 30% changes, a new content or new contribution, so that to be deserved, to be published in a journal. All right. So talking about extraction, this is just a generic template, because it's in debug. So when you extract, one question that you might ask, what do I need to extract? Okay, what you need to extract, other than this typical data, these are demographics data, like what year has been published, what is the title, where you get that paper, what's and then the context, what the study is about, what sort of technology they are offering, what kind of industry, what is the setting of the study, what instrument did they use, what kind of study is that, whether it is survey, a case study, an experiment, or what. Okay, and then the findings. So make sure when you do the data extraction, make sure what you wanted to extract, the elements in your data extraction, must contain data that will help you to answer the review questions. Remember, you have a set of this question or review questions in the beginning. Okay, so make sure that the data that you are extracting, would help you to answer your review questions. How did you know that? Well, that's why you have to read again and you have to know what your review question is about. What you want to know, the methods. Are you taking, or do you want to know about the methods or the results, or you want to know how effective it is? What are the focus of your research question? And those must appear in your data extraction form. Okay. So if let's say you have considered 50 studies or 25 studies, for example, then you must extract each and individual data from all these 25 studies. So that's why it is advisable if you can use, for example, Google Spreadsheet or Excel, the simplest way. And there are also a number of tools out there. There are many tools actually. Humongous of tools to do systematic review. Just need to explore a little bit. And then, okay, the last step is to perform the synthesis of evidence. Do you have any questions so far?
Yes, there is a question from the audience. Yeah.
Okay, please.
Brother Abdul here is asking, should he justify the reasons for paper that he excluded?
It is advisable.
Okay.
It is advisable because sometimes what we wanted to know, why do you exclude the papers? To some researcher, maybe they thought it's important paper, but you must have a good reason why you exclude. And it's important to document those things, yeah. And when you write a paper or reports, and be transparent that you have excluded 5 studies or 2 studies for the reason that the studies are da 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 da. So you mentioned the reasons for exclusion. So we are being fair. Okay.
There's another question by Sister Zalina. She's asking, when doing SLR, is it okay to include the result from published SLR in findings and result?
Is it okay to include
the result from published SLR? So that means another SLR findings.
Okay. You want to include where? In the SLR?
Yes, correct.
Oh, normally we don't include SLR in the SLR because that one is you are doing a tertiary study. Tertiary study is another level of literature review. Yeah, if you wanted to consider findings from SLR, okay, that should not appear in your SLR, right? Because that findings, SLR findings is actually already synthesized, okay? But SLR is only considering primary studies. When I said primary studies are individual studies, okay? It's not secondary study, okay? Secondary studies are like SLRs, survey studies. Survey study, remember survey of certain tools, for example, okay? So if you wanted to include findings from SLR into SLR, your SLR is called tertiary study. Tertiary, T-E-R-T-I-A-R-Y, tertiary study. Tertiary study is also an SLR. Okay, I repeat, tertiary study is also a form of SLR, a kind of SLR. But tertiary study is focusing only on published SLRs. Okay, for example, maybe in your area, there are already more than 50 SLRs. Yeah, maybe there are lots of SLR about one particular practice, for example. Many people do SLR, maybe in one particular focus area. But there are lots of SLR. What you can do is to perform a tertiary study. So you can accumulate, you can gather all these findings from secondary studies, from SLRs, to come out with another layer of interpretation of the findings. This is what we call as tertiary studies. Okay, so in other words, you cannot include, you should not, I wouldn't say you cannot, because you should not include. Because if you include evidence there, that evidence from the SLR already synthesizing some primary studies. What you should do is actually looking at what are the primary studies that particular SLR is looking at. And those primary studies should be considered in your SLR. Okay, so when you do the selection of studies in SLR, right? The studies must be an empirical study. It is a primary study. It is not a secondary study. Okay. So when to use that secondary study? When to use that SLR? If that SLR is relevant, what you can do is maybe you can see how your SLR is different than that study, that SLR. That's one thing. Another thing is, whenever you want to discuss the findings of your SRR, what you can do is that you can relate your findings with the findings from that SRR. So you can discuss in terms of the implications of the findings for research and practice, perhaps. I hope that helps.
Inshallah. All right.
Okay.
That's all for now.
So
Yeah.
the bottom line is we don't consider SLR study as one of the study in an SLR, except if that SLR is a tertiary study. That is fine.
Yeah.
I hope that is.
Hopefully, yeah, Dr. Zarina or Sister Zarina got that part, yeah. Yeah, but I think, yeah, so that's the bottom line. It should not be mixed around. If it's all SLR or SLRs, right? I mean, established SLRs.
Because when we do SLR, we are actually aggregating or synthesizing evidence from primary studies, not from SLR. SLR is already synthesized the evidence. They already have done the analysis of the findings. Okay. So what we need to do is, when we do SLR, we are only considering primary studies, not secondary studies.
Okay, she said thank you. It's very clear.
Okay, I hope that is clear. Okay, if you are not too sure what is, because there are many kind of review, not only systematic review. That is what would they call it? Multi-vocal literature review, MLV, MVL, multi-vocal. And there is a tertiary study. There is a mapping study. There are many kinds of secondary studies. Okay, mapping study is also a kind of SLR, but it's different a little bit. All right.
Okay.
So many kinds of method to conduct review. But don't confuse yourself. Just choose one. Choose one method that is appropriate and that is good enough, for you to perform a comprehensive review. Because when you synthesize the evidence, this is the last step in conducting phase. Okay, the last step in conducting phase is for you to see how do you make sense of all the data that you have extracted. How do you making sense of the data that you have extracted, and how are you going to be able to answer the question that you put forward in your SRR based on the data that you have gathered. This is the role of synthesis of evidence. So it refers to process of combining results from multiple studies. Okay, when I say multiple studies, multiple primary studies, not secondary studies. Okay, multiple primary studies. So how do we combine the results from multiple studies? Because normally in traditional review, we don't really concern about how do we integrating or how we aggregating or combining the result. We are just summarizing. I've seen typically thesis, the PhD candidate just summarize the paper. Paper 1 says, paper 2 says, paper 3 says. That's it. That is not a literature review. Okay, they're just putting a summary of the paper. It's okay, but how do you make sense of all these papers in terms of their findings? How do you see the gaps? Okay, because if you're doing PhD, you need to justify. Okay, you need to identify the gaps, so that to support your problem statement or your research problem. Okay, that's why this is serious part where you need to know how are you going to make sense of all the data. Now that here you have all the papers, how do you gather all this evidence? The key objectives of data synthesis is to analyze and evaluate multiple studies. Okay, now we are talking about multiple studies, the findings from multiple studies, not only the findings, but we are checking everything when we are aggregating. Okay, in terms of the demographics, right? Numbers, for example, we can see the publication trends. For example, for the past 10 years. Okay, when is what year the publication is reaching its peak? So you know the trend when you have gathered, for example, the year of publication. So you can calculate. For example, for the past 5 years, there are reduction 20% in the studies. Why? So synthesis of evidence is not only presenting the result, but also your interpretation of the findings. This is where you think about how you can infer, okay, from the findings. And you must use an appropriate method, for integrating the study's findings, and also providing new interpretive explanation. This is your contribution. How can you explain why is that so? Why the result is so? Why why the findings are contradicting? Is there in anything contradicting or not? Or are they all presenting all positive findings? Okay, so these are the things that we wanted to see. And in most situations, yes, we use the narrative descriptive synthesis. Yeah, this is types of synthesis. It could be numerical, such as meta-analysis or word counting. And it can also be descriptive synthesis, where you can also apply certain method like thematic analysis, content analysis, grounded theory, or meta-ethnography. Okay, so I mean the method. Okay, the method. How do you perform the synthesis? You can apply those things in synthesizing the evidence. Okay, and it is not mandatory that you must use both. Okay, but in most situations, you can just present it in a form of table. So most likely, descriptive synthesis is the choice, yeah, because this is quite, I would say, quite straightforward when you perform the descriptive synthesis. Not necessarily you must use thematic analysis, yeah. I'm saying descriptive in the sense that you use words, you use text. You describe it. You describe it narratively. Yeah, you describe the overall findings narratively. Okay, and provide explanation to the findings. Well, it is possible to use some tools, yeah, like Atlas TI, or even if you don't want to use any tools, it's okay as well, depending on the amount of findings that you have to analyze, or the amount of data that you have extracted. Okay, for numerical synthesis, it is only possible if you want to do meta-analysis, if there is well, a number of quantitative studies. For example, maybe you have found, let's say, a number of experiments, a number of formal experiments. Okay, so you can see whether those experiments are, well, they are actually referring to the same intervention or not. Okay, so you can see, because you cannot compare apple and orange. Okay, you must compare the same thing. It has to be homogeneous. Yeah, it has to. The study must be homogeneous. Okay.
Dr. Sarimah, you got 8 minutes, yeah, to wrap up. I mean,
okay.
because I saw your slides, there's a lot more.
Oh, banyak lagi. Okay, kita pergi. Okay, let me speed up. So meta-analysis is a statistical technique that can be used to pull data or to aggregate results from different studies. As I said just now, it has to be homogeneous. Okay, so the outcome of meta-analysis, what you can see is an average effect size. This is one example of the output. When you come up with a meta-analysis, yeah, you can actually present the results from meta-analysis by using a forest plot. This is an example of forest plot. Yeah. So in a meta-analysis, as I said just now, data has to be quantitative, number one. Okay. Number two, they are not apple and orange. Okay, because you cannot compare. For example, in this study, let's say you wanted to compare between pair programming and solo programming. So that is intervention, yeah, and the control there. All right, intervention and treatment. So these are all the studies, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 6 experiments that compare between pair programming and solo programming. So remember, quantitative studies, typically they at least will report some means and variations, some standard deviations. If the study provide those data, okay, you can actually collect those data, okay, and then for you to measure the effect size. Unfortunately, not many studies actually be transparent in terms of reporting their effect size. By right, when they do an experiment, they must report the effect size. I'm talking about quantitative study. So when they don't report the effect size, but they say what are the means, values, what are the standard deviations, all those things, you can still calculate the effect size. Okay, so the point here is that when you do the meta-analysis is, you wanted to see what is the average effect size. If you look at this diamond, small diamond here, this is a pool, the pool effect size. Okay, the pool effect size will tell you how significant the finding is. Okay, in terms of the effects, yeah, of the intervention. For example, how effective pair programming is compared to solo programming. So in this example, it gives 0.67. Yeah, the pool effect size. This is considered as medium effect size. right? So there is a category of effect size, small, medium, large. You can refer to some studies that talks. There are not only Capeners, Cohen as well. Yeah, Cohen also provided some explanation about how do we categorize the effect size. Okay, let me backward lah. Okay, how do you perform the meta-analysis? Okay, there are 3 steps basically. Okay, number 1 is that you must know what kind of study you have to consider in the meta-analysis. Number 2, you must perform the estimate of effect size for each individual study. If they don't report, you have to come up with. If they report, you have to take that particular value. But it's also good if you can calculate effect size yourself by using certain tools. Yeah, like CMA, like Mix. There are a few other tools that you can use to calculate the meta-analysis, effect size, sorry. And then combine the effect size from all the studies to come up with one pool effect size. All right. Okay, now descriptive synthesis is an approach to synthesis of findings from multiple studies that relies primarily on the use of word syntax to summarize and explain the findings of the synthesis. You see here, not only summarize, but explain. Okay, explain the findings, interpret the findings using word syntax. So it adopts a textual approach to this process of synthesis to tell the story of the findings from the included studies. I think that is all good. This is some methods. All right, narrative, thematic. Well, not necessarily that you have to do all, okay? And even you don't use any of this is okay as well. But as long as you are able to summarize the finding and as well as provide an explanation to what the finding is, explanation, interpretation. Okay, because you are talking about accumulative findings, aggregation of findings from qualitative studies. Well, for quantitative studies, that's why you can do descriptive synthesis, okay? Okay, now the final stage is reporting. Okay, this is the time where you have to write the SRL findings. So you can disseminate the results in the form of conference papers as well as journal publication. It can be a technical report. It can be in any form, in news, for example. So it has to be evaluated and submitted to it is advisable. You can submit to a good journal. All right. Okay, that is all.
Okay, you have done a good.
I'm speeding up. So I
Yeah.
want to
Yeah, I was about to say, yeah, no, time is almost up. Okay, is there any disturbing questions that you need to ask from the audience? Yeah.
question from audience or question from me?
Yeah, from the audience. No, I couldn't see any more questions from YouTube. Yeah.
Assalamualaikum, Dr. Salimah.
Salam, that's who.
Okay.
I have a general question. So let's say we are doing SLR for a very recent topic, and it turned out that we don't get enough papers. So what is your suggestion? I mean, we have already expanded the databases, but we still don't have enough papers. Does it mean that we're not ready for SLR?
Okay, very good question, Dr. Suryani. That is not a problem if you have found a very little studies, because that shows the level of maturity of that area. Maybe as you said, that area is very new. Maybe people just explore it for the past 5 years. Maybe lah, example kan. Maybe within the past 5 years or the past 3 years, very little studies. Even if very little studies, as long as not only one study lah, okay? Because we are talking about a number of studies. So it's okay to have a small number of studies, okay? For you to conduct a systematic review, it doesn't matter because you can justify in the sense that the area is very recent, okay? There is no review so far being done. There is no survey being done. There's no research done whatsoever in this particular area, and this serves as one significant contribution because we wanted to see what the researcher up to, even for the past 5 years, if it's very recent. So it is possible. I give you one example. I have a colleague when I did my PhD a long time ago. He conducted SRI and he obtained in the end only 5 studies. And he's comparing with my SRR. He said, I don't get as much as you get. And then we talked to the supervisor. So the professor, our professor, she advised, it doesn't matter, okay? So in the end of the day, even with 5 studies, he managed to publish in a very high-ranking journal. Okay, because there is a contribution, and he can justify because he was looking at a software process improvement. But software process improvement, although it looks large, but he was looking only at small and medium enterprise. And small and medium enterprise, and looking at SPI, and only for web projects. You see, so he was very zoom in his topic, and in the end of the day, he just managed to get 5 studies. Although the SPI context in the small and medium enterprise maybe has been there for maybe 10 years or something, but at that point when he did the research, it is a mature topic. It is a mature topic, but he could manage to find only 5 because the context of his PhD is very focused. He just wanted to look at the SPI, software process improvement, for small and medium companies. Okay, and of those companies that are working on web projects. So you see, they are very focused in their SRR because that's his PhD. So it doesn't matter. In the end, he got 5 papers, and it's still valid for him to do a synthesis of evidence based on these 5 papers. So there's no magic number. The bottom line. Okay, but as long as tak ada only one study je nak buat SLR, then no point lah kan. One study only, what SLR you want to do? Okay, betul tak? Kan?
So at least 5 lah, yeah.
At least lah, kan.
Alright.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Sarimah. I think we already reached 11:30. So
Ada lagi soalan? Ni ada?
Dekat YouTube dah habis.
Oh, dah habis.
Dekat YouTube dah habis. Dekat
ada soalan ni lagi
dalam Zoom ada. Okay, salam doktor, in the inclusion criteria can I include only under institution subscription content?
Yes, only can I include inclusion can I include only under institution. That means you wanted to consider you don't spell out in the inclusion actually, but you justify in the selection of platform, selection of database. Okay, so you don't include that in the inclusion criteria, because of course when we wanted to search, of course the searching will depends on our ability to access the online databases. I hope this is talking about subscription to the online databases, kan, Nadia? Nadia, are you here? Okay. Can I include only under institution subscription content? Yes, because for example, our university, our library kan, so our library has limited access to database. So that cannot be, that should not be your inclusion criteria. But your inclusion criteria must be related to the topic only. Okay, but when you wanted to justify the choice of online database, why you have only 2 or 3 databases? Because these are the databases that are subscribed by the International Islamic University Malaysia. Halas, you know, not to give excuse, but it is a situation there. Because we have limitation in terms of the our ability to access the database, so we cannot unless you have a co-researcher who can access a lot more database. So that is a different case. But to answer your question, it should not be included in the inclusion criteria. Okay, but you have to explain the choice and justify the choice in your paper. Itu jawapannya. Okay, ada lagi soalan? Any more question?
I think that's about it, yeah, for today. Yeah, so it's a very good information sharing session. Yeah, and I think I learned a lot. But there's so many claims in the papers as well. They just say it's systematic literature review, but it's not. Yeah, but I actually noticed there's a long process for it. Yeah, so thank you so much, Dr. Sarimah. We are looking forward to have you again.
Inshallah.
Yeah, and thank you also for to the organizer, Office of Responsible Research and Innovation, Promotion and Marketing team for organizing this webinar, and thank you everyone for participating in this webinar. Yeah, so we hope to see you again next time, and let's end our session with Tasbih, Kifara, and Surah Wal-Asr.
Okay, thank you so much everyone. Assalamualaikum.
Thank you everyone. Yeah.
Wabarakatuh.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sarimah.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Sarimah. Thank you, Dr. Shima.
Okay.
Alright. Okay.